Good morning, Facebook Livers. This is Jeff Vastola here on Saturday morning at 7:30, here to give you some free legal advice. A little bit of weather.
19 will bring us very heavy rainfall and gusty winds.
Lots of rain today in Florida.
Flood watch in effect, so of course.
So thanks for tuning in this morning. If anybody on Facebook Live has questions, please type them in, and I'll do my best to get with you either during the show or immediately after the show. So here's the intro to the show. Just bear with me.
The following program is paid for by Vastola Legal. The views and opinions expressed in this content do not reflect those of 850 WFTL. Hey, we know it's early.
Maybe time for a new intro.
To start your day than by getting free legal advice. This is Vastola on the Law with your host, attorney Jeff Vastola, featuring 30 minutes of free legal advice. Call in now with your questions. 877-850-8585. That's 877-850-8585. Now here's your host, attorney Jeff Vastola.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for tuning into the radio or watching me on Facebook Live. If you're a radio show listener and you're wondering what that's all about, then request me as a friend on Facebook. I think I'm easy to find, and I will accept your friend request, and then as I go live on Facebook every Saturday morning, it should pop up. If you are on Facebook, it should give you some kind of a notification that I'm live, and you can just tune in that way. If you don't have that capability, or if you just prefer to listen via the radio, that's fine with me. That's why I keep paying for the radio show. Good morning, Sharina. How are you? I may have caught her off guard. But Sharina, my board operator over at the radio station, she will take care of all the phone calls. All the phone calls, as if I get that many. Good morning, Mom, and good morning, Maddie. How you doing, Dunny? Nice to see you again. If you'd like to call into the show, you heard the number once already. It's 877-850-8585. That's the number to call into the show during these next 25 minutes or so to be live on the air with me. You can ask me anything you want. Now, I'm only licensed in the state of Florida, so my advice is only good in the state of Florida, and I've had to keep emphasizing that because with Facebook Live I have people that watch from all over the country. But if you have a question of your own, more of a generic in nature, then I'll be happy to try to answer it, like Karen from last week in Louisiana. But if I can't answer your question right here and right now on the show, then I'll do the research that I have to do and provide you with what I think is an educated response to your question the following week. And if you're not available to watch the show or hear the show via the radio, then you can go to my website, because all of the shows, the audio and the Facebook Live, are saved on my website. So you can go back to the episode where the answer was given, and you can watch it, you can fast forward through it, and get what you need. But that's why I'm here, to give you free legal advice every Saturday for 30 minutes. It's actually much beyond that. I get phone calls all the time, and I'm not complaining. I'm kind of, again, reminding people that if you want to call me anytime, it doesn't matter if it's on the weekend, it doesn't matter if it's at night, I want you to call me, and I want you to call me on my cell phone. And my cell phone number to do that is 833-VASTOLA. Cousin Cheryl, how are you? 833-VASTOLA is the number to call me after the show, anytime that you want. And if I can't answer the phone, leave me a voicemail message and I will call you back. 833-827-8652. I know a lot of people don't like it when they have to try to figure out what number corresponds with the letter. So thanks for tuning in. I've got some interesting things to talk about today. On tap, we have Florida Statute 44.104, which I think personally is going to be the remedy for what is going to be a really big problem because of COVID-19. Hey, Courtney. My neighbor down the street. How are you? Chelsea, nice to see you again. Been a long time. But anyway, I'm joking. When I was with Chelsea last night. So the problem that trial lawyers are seeing since COVID-19 began in mid-March is that we really haven't had a jury trial since. Now, I know Florida is saying, well, they had a test run down in Miami with a full-blown jury trial with, you know, a jury selection and evidence presentation and all that kind of stuff. But that was a non-binding result. So the parties were not stuck with the result if they didn't like it. They were just kind of trying to figure out how all of this was going to work. Then up in Leon County, which is Tallahassee, an article came out just a couple of weeks ago that Florida did have its very first jury trial up in Tallahassee, but the trial that was selected was not really a full-blown, what you would expect as a full-blown trial. There was no defendant. There was very little evidence to present. There wasn't much in the way of jury selection because all they needed was 6 warm bodies to fill the seats. And so it's not really exemplar of what a jury trial would normally be. So as we sit here in mid-September, we haven't had a jury trial in the state of Florida since mid-March. So, hey, Elizabeth, how are you? One of my soccer friends. The problem is, before COVID ever became a household name, there was already a backlog in the court system. To get to a jury trial in a civil case, hello, Patty, it was going to take you, I always tell my clients, I sit down with them in the conference room and because they always want to know, well, how long is this going to take to get to trial? And so I will tell them, if we filed your lawsuit today, we probably will not get to a jury trial for at least 1.5 to 2 years from right now. That's my typical spiel when I'm talking to a new client about a typical case. That was before COVID. Now, we haven't had a jury trial since March, and all of these cases are now going to be backlogged on top of the existing backlog. So, what are we going to do about it? I have the answer for you, and I'm pretty excited about it because I think I'm going to be part of the solution, at least I hope to be. And that's through Florida Statute 44.104, which specifically sets forth a procedure for voluntary trial resolution. Hello, Jen. How are you? Voluntary trial resolution, similar to arbitration. If you've heard me talk before, not a huge fan of arbitration. I understand that it's got its place, and I've arbitrated several cases before. I understand the process, and it's not as though I hate arbitration and wouldn't do it if necessary, but I think this voluntary trial resolution is a much better option, a much better remedy for the problem that we're going to have and we are already having. The question is, when are trials going to start? Now, Martin County, of the 63 counties in the state of Florida, of course, Leon's saying they've already presented a jury trial, but Chief Judge Merman from the 19th Judicial Circuit, which is Martin County here in our backyard, and some of the neighboring counties, issued an article, issued a ruling. I guess it was a ruling, or maybe he just went on record to say that Martin County is going to start jury trials in October. Now, how they're going to do that, we have no idea. We're seeing that now the kids have gone back to school. You're getting some positive COVID results, and so kids are being told, well, now you got to go home. How is all of that going to play out if you're in the middle of a jury trial and somebody tests positive? Typically, when you pick a jury for a civil trial, you pick 7, possibly 8 jurors, depending on the length of the trial. If it's going to be several weeks long, you'll pick 8. But the reality is only 6 deliberate. So the 7th juror and the 8th juror, if they're picked, are alternate jurors, and they step in to fill in as an actual deliberating juror if one of the first 6 gets sick, get into a car accident, something happens and they can't finish their duty. So I don't know, maybe with the onset of COVID, instead of selecting 7 jurors for a standard 1 to 2 week civil trial, we might be picking as many as 12 or 10 or 12 or something like that. Now that's a lot of alternates, and what I've seen time and again is once a juror has sat through a jury trial for up to 2 weeks, and then at the very end, as they're about to get into the good stuff, the deliberations, the judge calls them up to the front and says, oh, I'm sorry, you're an alternate, you have to go, because by law the alternates cannot sit in on deliberation. Sometimes they're not too pleased. Sometimes people know. If they've been through it before, they realize that, and depending on where they're sitting, they might realize that, hey, I'm the alternate. But sometimes people don't know they're the alternate, and when they find out, sometimes they're not always happy about it because they've dedicated a lot of their time to the trial, and it's part of the process. Hey, Mike, how you doing? Good morning. So anybody on Facebook Live, if you want to type in, sorry, these things are flying through. Hi, Jeff. Yes, Mandy and the kids are great. Thanks, Jen. I hope your kids are doing well too. So type in questions. I'll do my best to get to them while I'm talking during the show. But what I've found is that it's kind of hard for me to do that. So after the show, if I see questions and things, that's probably when I'll respond to you. But if you'd like to call into the radio show, that's one thing that's been conspicuously missing since I've started doing the Facebook Live, is I'm not getting as many phone calls, I think because I'm not pushing for them. Please call into the radio station, because we want your call live on the air. People that are watching by Facebook Live can hear the audio and they can hear your phone call. And it makes the show much, much more interesting. If you've ever gone back and watched these episodes in a replay, I can tell you from personal experience, I'd much rather listen to people calling into the show and having that dialogue than me just talking at you. If you'd like to call into the show with a question of your own, 877-850-8585. One more time, 877-850-8585. That's the number to call into the show. Hey, Dad. Logging in from Rockport. I understand you and Lee had a good time and her family. That's awesome. So, and I know people listen to the radio show, and I know they have questions because people will call me after the fact. And very politely, I will say, please call me on the radio show, because what you're talking about and the questions that you have could truly benefit somebody else. And I don't always think to talk about these things that people call me about later on. Now, I realize that sometimes they're personal in nature and you don't want to share, and that's fine. So that's why I encourage people to call me on my cell phone after the fact. But a lot of the things people call about are things that you can certainly just kind of throw out there, and because it's really questions more so than anything. So Florida Statute 44.104, it's an alternative to jury trials. Whether you've already filed your lawsuit or not, you can use this, and I'm going to talk in more detail about that. There was a guy that called me, speaking of people that could call into the show. Okay, Dad, I see your question. The number to call into the radio show is 877-850-8585. So use that number to call into the show. Sharina will put you live on the air with me. The only thing we ask is that you mind your manners. We don't want to hear about the name of the person that you want to sue, or who's defamed you, or whatever it is. I'm going to talk about a couple of other things that came up this week. First of all, the statute of limitations on a couple different types of cases. The first, wrongful death. And I'm just going to go ahead and mention this now before I run out of time, because it's really important. I was speaking with an individual about a case, and as we were getting into the details of the case and the merits and the legal theories and everything else, he mentioned to me, well, I've already had a couple of lawyers look at this, and for one reason or another, he decided not to hire them. And I said, well, just keep in mind that you've got a limited amount of time, because it was a wrongful death claim. And he said, well, no, I've got 4 years. I'm not worried about that. And I said, whoa, who told you that you've got 4 years? And without naming, he didn't even give me the name. It doesn't matter. But one of the lawyers that he had talked to, for some reason, suggested to him or told him that his statute of limitations was 4 years. And maybe because all they heard about the story was that it was a car accident. Well, the problem is, if you're injured in a car accident, in a standard car accident in Florida, yes, your statute of limitations is 4 years, meaning you've got 4 years to file your lawsuit. The problem is, if there's a wrongful death because of that same car accident, well, now your statute of limitations is not 4 years, it's 2 years. There is a statute. Good morning, Brian. Nice to see you watching the show. There's a statute in Florida, Florida's wrongful death statute, that takes over when there's a wrongful death, as opposed to just an injury from a car accident. And the wrongful death statute applies in any wrongful death context. So once there is a wrongful death, now you've got a 2-year statute of limitations to bring your case instead of 4. And I just thought that was, it was to me kind of shocking that he would have that wrong information, but also it's kind of scary to think that, people might lose out on an otherwise meritorious case because they simply wait too long. And on that issue, I'm going to quickly refer to my Florida Law Weekly. There's a case in here. It's a maritime case, which is interesting because I do maritime work. I recently took on a maritime case in my office, but that's not why I'm talking about this case. I'm talking about this case, which is entitled Mauricio Importadora y Exportadora versus Jet Speed Logistics. This was a commercial contract for delivery of some goods. Good morning, Lee. And the goods were to be delivered. It was laptop computers that were going to be delivered internationally using freighters. Well, what happened was the plaintiff that wanted to file the lawsuit waited longer than 1 year to file the lawsuit. The defendant, because they figured, well, it's just a standard breach of contract claim, which in Florida, if you have a written contract, the statute of limitations to pursue a breach of contract claim is 5 years. So 1 year longer than standard, injury SOL, which is only 4 years. Plaintiff and plaintiff's lawyer mistakenly assumed that they were going to have a longer period of time to file the lawsuit. The defendant, through perhaps a clever defense attorney, said, no, this is a maritime action, and the COGSA, Carriage of Goods on the Sea Act, applies, which is federal law, federal maritime law, and contained within that statute, there is a limitation that the SOL, the statute of limitations, is 1 year. We call it a period of limitations in our nomenclature, but most people know it as a statute of limitations. The period of limitations in that federal statute is only 1 year. And the plaintiff waited longer than 1 year to file this lawsuit, and they were talking about how, I forget the number of laptop computers, but it was well into the hundreds, if not thousands, of laptop computers went missing, and they're out of luck because they waited too long. So
I have Dr. Vastola on the line for you.
Oh boy, here we go. All right. Good morning, Dr. Vastola.
Hey, Jeff.
How you doing, Dad? Just don't make it political. Nothing political, please.
No. Well, this is law. And it's a very relevant question. With the neighbors, you could talk a little bit about the virus on and off. And I don't think that this is well established, but it's going to happen. What is in your opinion, what would be the liability of someone not wearing a mask and giving it to another person?
Well, right off the bat, the thing that strikes me immediately is the causation element there. You're going to have a really, really hard time proving whether you're the plaintiff and you're trying to prove that you got the virus from this other person, or if it's a criminal action and you're the defendant because the state is prosecuting you because you coughed on another person. I think the state's going to have a very hard time with its burden with the causation element, because it's such a novel disease. You know more than I do about this, but it's so difficult to be able to pinpoint when somebody got it and from where. So, in a courtroom, that's a necessary element of a case. So I see that as a trial lawyer as being a big problem to anybody that's trying to use the virus as a sword. Now, I'm not sure if you saw the article, Dad, but there was a woman, and I don't remember where it was, maybe San Francisco or something like that, but she intentionally coughed on an elderly woman in a store. And I don't know the backdrop of the story, and I don't know why she did it. But I saw the initial story, and then I saw a follow-up to that.
It was all over the internet.
Right. Yeah, and then there was the follow-up story where she was being criminally prosecuted. Now, she was being criminally prosecuted, and the state attorney would have taken a strong look at the case and would have decided that yes, we have enough evidence to prove our case, but she was being criminally prosecuted for assault. So an assault charge doesn't necessarily mean the woman gave COVID to the elderly lady. An assault charge, if you look at it, it's just the intent. You don't actually have to make contact with assault. It's just the intent to, I forget the verbiage of the actual claim. But I don't know what's happened with that, but you can see already that a woman not wearing a mask and exposing another person has been criminally prosecuted. And if anybody watching on Facebook Live knows what happened to that, please chime in. I'd love to know. But
I think that's good information because a lot of people aren't wearing masks. Maybe this would be the right reason to wear a mask because there's always that threat. There's always just for your audience, the coronavirus is still here.
Right.
We're seeing about 2 or 3 cases still a week. So it's not as intense, it's not as severe, but it's still there, and it's an extremely contagious virus. So what we're seeing with our colleges now is that these kids get back to school, and the first thing they do is start partying up, and then there's major problems. I mean, University of South Carolina just shut down the whole school because of But within
Yeah.
a week that they had gotten back when they had to start this pool party, and the pictures were very demonstrable. So,
remember, there was a story up in Martin County in downtown Stewart of a woman. Now, this goes back several months ago when COVID was really a novel issue. People were very afraid of it. But she was walking around downtown Stewart and not wearing a mask, and she was arrested and fined. And that's something that can happen. Now, that's not the fine is not necessarily a criminal prosecution, but if you're not wearing a mask, but your government, whatever state and county you're in, has said you need to wear a mask if you're in public and you're not doing it, you can subject yourself to a fine. So.
Well, that's true here. Up here in the Northeast, in the Massachusetts, Boston area, you have to, by law, wear a mask. And we see people approached by the police, and the fines are pretty hefty if you don't have a mask.
Yeah, they can be up to $1,000 per incident, from what I've seen.
Yeah, they're pretty strict about it here. And the police station at the very public area, to head that problem off. Let me give you one more question that keeps popping up on the internet. Is there not a law? I mean, the election's coming up and there's a controversy, but one thing that keeps popping up because of some people's hatred for the president is they threaten the president.
He just can't help himself.
Is there not a statute? Is there not a statute that it is a crime if you threaten the president?
Sure, of course there is. I'll have to do some research and tell you exactly what it is, but yeah, it's a pretty important law not to threaten the president. So I'll tell you what, then I'll take that as a topic for next week. Hey Jennifer, how are you? My cousin Jennifer.
None of these people are listening, and so it's just publicity and learning, which is a pretty serious problem. Because next thing you know, someone's going to try to do something stupid.
Oh.
But,
all right, well listen, I don't want this to get political, so Dad, I'm going to let you go, but I appreciate the topic for next week, okay?
Okay, good.
All right.
Yeah, looking good.
All right, thanks for calling,
Okay,
Dad.
okay.
Yeah, those of you that are watching and listening to my father on the radio show who just called in, you might be thinking I'm talking to myself. I've been told my whole life that I sound like my dad. So good morning, Maura. Nice to see you. Thanks for calling in, Dad. I certainly appreciate that. And now I've got a topic for next week. That's great. So before I run out of time, and believe it or not, I'm almost out of time. I can't understand where the time goes. I feel like I'm in like a time machine. I sit in it at 7:30, and the next thing you know, it's almost 8 o'clock. Florida Statute 44.104, at least for trial lawyers, people representing individuals that are looking for civil juries to resolve their disputes, may have a remedy for the problem that COVID has created, and it's in what's called a voluntary trial resolution. And I just want to bring it to anybody's attention out there. Good morning, Patty. I'm going to have to answer your question, Patty, after the show because I got to try to get this stuff out, but I will. A voluntary trial resolution is where you basically have all of the benefits of a jury trial, except perhaps without the jury, and it's expedited and it's basically under your control, and you can select who you want your judge to be. Now, if you were to go to the courthouse and file a lawsuit, judges are randomly selected. Now, of course, it depends on the county in which you file. Some counties are so small that there's only one judge in for example, the Circuit Civil Division, so you know who your judge is going to be. But if you filed in Palm Beach County, I think there's as many as 15 to 20 different Circuit Civil judges, and you don't get to pick your judge. So this voluntary trial resolution, I think, is going to be a remedy to help the backlog in the courthouse. And I wanted people to be aware of it, and I wanted people to know that I am qualified to act as a voluntary trial resolution judge. Not only am I a Supreme Court Circuit Civil certified mediator, so I'm a mediator, I am also qualified to act as an arbitrator. You may have heard me say I'm not the biggest fan of arbitration, but non-binding arbitration is another alternative. If you're stuck, if your case is just not going anywhere and you want to expedite the process, then this is an option. But I like the voluntary trial resolution because it's essentially giving you the opportunity to try your case outside of the courthouse and on your timeline. That's the most important thing, because if you're going to sit back and wait for a jury trial in the courthouse with the judge, then I hate to say it, but my fear is that my clients aren't going to be seeing jury trials for. If we were to file the lawsuit today, if you've been watching since the beginning of the show, I will tell my clients you probably don't get to trial for 1.5 to 2 years. Now I'm probably going to have to tell my clients you're probably not going to see a jury trial for 2 to 3 years, at least until the courthouse figures out how to get rid of this backlog. And that was not something that the courthouse was able to successfully do even before COVID. So, there was such a tremendous backlog before. Unless they go out and hire a bunch of more judges to handle all of these cases, I don't know what the resolution is beyond Florida Statute 44.104. So there's a lot in the statute that I wanted to talk about, but I'm running out of time. I know Shireen is going to tell me here any minute that I've got like 30 seconds, but it can be done almost identical to a jury trial, just expedited. Everything's kind of expedited in this setting, and it's really very favorable. The Florida Evidence Code applies. Now, there are some things that you cannot use this alternative dispute resolution
1 minute.
for. There she is. Thank you, Sharina. It doesn't apply to child custody issues, visitation issues, child support, or to any dispute where there's rights of a third party that are not involved in the claim. But anyway, that's just kind of the caveat to the statute. There's another, I'm not going to have time to talk about it, but I'll just give you guys a teaser. There's a Fifth Amendment case in the Florida Law Weekly that I thought was very interesting. I'll be talking about that next week. It's another wrongful death case.
Seconds.
Car accident. If anybody would like to talk to me about a case, or if you just have a question, after the show, call me 833-VASTOLA. That's 833-827-8652. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. And please let me know how I can help you. Everyone have a great weekend,
10 seconds.
and talk to you next week. Thank you, Sharina. Take care.